Clark muscling away.
I mean, is that displacement? I think it is.
Oh, and Marina Mabrey's going to get ejected. If the officials saw that, Marina Mabrey is going to get ejected.
Well, they're going to go and look at it. Clearly, that's a foul.
And it's contact to the face as well. It'd be interesting to know if they're going to look at that first one for a flagrant foul. There wasn't.
The rage had been building for months. Every dirty play, every cheap shot, every time the refs looked the other way while her teammates got hurt. Sophie Cunningham had been keeping score, and in the final minute of this game, it was time to settle that debt. She lined up Jacy Sheldon with ice-cold precision, wrapped her arms around the player who had terrorized her team, and delivered the most beautiful act of revenge the WNBA has ever seen.
Sheldon going coast to coast. And here we got another breakers here as Jacy Sheldon goes right after Sophie Cunningham.
That's a flagrant foul. It's a hard foul. You could say it's a play on the ball, but
this wasn't just a flagrant foul. This was pure, calculated vengeance that sent shockwaves through the entire basketball world. When Sophie sent Sheldon crashing to the floor, every Fever fan felt that satisfaction deep in their soul. Finally, someone made Jacy Sheldon pay for all the pain she had caused. Finally, justice was served with the kind of brutal efficiency that leaves no doubt about the message being sent.
And let's start with the play that set off the entire night. So as you guys can see here, Jacy Sheldon is guarding Caitlin Clark. She swipes her in the eyeball. Caitlin Clark nudges her off because Jacy stays in her face. And then Tina Charles runs over and is kind of wagging her finger in Caitlin Clark's face. And then Marina Mabrey comes out of nowhere and chucks her to the floor. Now let's watch this in slow motion. Here, Jacy Sheldon is guarding Caitlin, swipes her in the face. There's one. Going for the ball, swipes her in the eyeball. Caitlin's gonna have to start wearing goggles. And then Caitlin pushes her off of her, like, why are you still in my face? Marina Mabrey, bat out of hell, chucks Caitlin Clark to the ground.
The bear hug takedown that got Sophie ejected wasn't random violence or a moment of poor judgment. It was the explosive climax of a revenge story months in the making. When Sheldon drove to the basket in those final seconds, thinking she was safe in garbage time, Sophie saw her moment and took it without hesitation. The crowd went absolutely insane. The benches emptied, and suddenly every basketball fan on earth was talking about the most satisfying payback they'd ever witnessed. But this story of perfect revenge doesn't start with Sophie's moment of justice. It starts with blood, tears, and two Fever players lying injured on the court, while Jacy Sheldon walked away smiling, and the officials pretended they didn't see anything.
Sophie Cunningham, she's exactly what the Indiana Fever needed. She's what Caitlin Clark needed. She is the energy button. She is the toughness. She is the enforcer that the Indiana Fever desperately needed. Sophie Cunningham is not remotely scared, and she showed that last night. I'm not sure if her takedown of Jacy Sheldon was totally related to defending Caitlin Clark, but I am sure that this takedown with 46 seconds left to go in a game that they were up 16, 17, 18 points, the game was over, and she's tackling someone on a layup.
May Traintaff, Indiana Fever versus Connecticut Sun. What should have been a regular season game turned into a nightmare that left two Fever players injured and everyone questioning if this was still basketball or street fighting. Jacy Sheldon came out playing like she had a personal vendetta, and by the end of the night, two of Clark's teammates were on the ground hurt. Sophie Cunningham went down first. The contact wasn't accidental, wasn't a basketball play, and definitely wasn't the kind of hard foul you see in competitive games. This was deliberate, reckless, and designed to hurt. Cunningham hit the floor hard, her ankle twisted in a way that made everyone watching wince. She didn't just suffer an ankle injury that night. Part of her front tooth got knocked clean out from the contact with Sheldon. Blood, pain, and a player who wouldn't return to action for weeks. Then, Sydney Colson got targeted. Sheldon dove for a loose ball, but instead of going for the basketball, she went through Colson's knee. The impact twisted Colson's leg in directions legs aren't supposed to bend. You could hear the collective gasp from the crowd as they watched another Fever player crumple to the floor because of the same Connecticut Sun player who had just hurt Cunningham minutes earlier. 2 contact injuries, same player, same game, same refs who acted like they were watching a completely different sport. The worst part wasn't just the injuries themselves. It was watching the officials let it all happen without consequence.
Everybody's getting better, except the officials. So we got to find a way to remedy it. I mean, you've heard every coach talk about it, so I don't know what the answer is.
Hard fouls went uncalled. Dangerous plays got ignored. Jacy Sheldon walked around that court like she owned it, while 2 of Clark's teammates limped off injured. Every possession felt like someone else might get hurt, and the refs seemed perfectly fine letting the violence escalate.
Stephanie White, 100% right in her post-game press conference, yelling about it, talking about the officials and how they got to take control of this. No control was exerted. There's no, because of replay. I think in large part because of replay, the officials just do this and they go to the monitor. There's no authority in going to the monitor. There's no exercising authority. There's no comeuppance. There's no consequence that's immediate. Like, you, get out of here. You, out of here. Let's go. Dick Bavetta style. You, gone. None of that.
Caitlin Clark had to stand there and watch her teammates get destroyed by dirty plays while wearing an Indiana Fever uniform. She saw Cunningham bleeding from her mouth. She watched Colson's leg get twisted up, and she knew that the same player responsible for both injuries would face 0 consequences for what just happened. The Fever fought hard, but lost that game 85-83. They didn't just lose on the scoreboard, though. They lost 2 key players to injuries that could have been prevented if someone in stripes had done their job properly. More importantly, they learned that the officials weren't going to protect them from players who wanted to hurt them. Clark's face during the handshake line told the whole story. The way she looked at Sheldon, the controlled anger in her eyes, the tight-lipped responses in her post-game interview. This wasn't over, not even close. The Fever would remember every single detail of what happened that night, and when they got their chance for payback, they were going to take it. This rivalry didn't start in the WNBA. It started years earlier when Jacy Sheldon made it her personal mission to torment Caitlin Clark during their college days. Iowa versus Ohio State became must-watch television, partly because of the individual battle between these 2 players who genuinely couldn't stand each other. Sheldon shadowed Clark everywhere on the court. She bumped her on screens, talked trash during dead balls, and played with the kind of aggressive intensity that crosses the line from competitive to personal. Every time Iowa faced Ohio State, Sheldon treated it like her opportunity to prove she could get inside Clark's head and throw off her game. The psychological warfare was constant. Sheldon would get up close during free throws, make comments that only Clark could hear, and do all the little things that drive players crazy but don't show up in the stat sheet. She studied Clark's tendencies not just to defend her, but to find ways to frustrate her and disrupt her rhythm throughout entire games. Clark called Sheldon her mortal enemy during those college years, and she wasn't exaggerating. This went beyond normal basketball rivalry into something much more personal and intense. When both players declared for the WNBA draft, everyone knew their beef wasn't going to stay in college. If anything, the professional level would make their battles even more heated. The history between these 2 players explains everything about what happened during that May 30th game. Sheldon wasn't just playing aggressive defense against another WNBA player. She was continuing a years-long campaign to make Clark's life miserable on the basketball court. The only difference now was that Clark had teammates who weren't going to stand by and watch their star player get targeted by dirty plays. When Sheldon hurt Cunningham and Colson in that May game, she crossed a line that had nothing to do with her rivalry with Clark. She brought innocent players into a personal beef that should have stayed between her and Clark. That decision would come back to haunt her in the worst possible way. June 17th arrives, and Caitlin Clark is back from her quad injury, fresh off a dominant performance against the then undefeated New York Liberty. She's healthy, she's confident, and she's about to face the Connecticut Sun again with revenge on her mind. This is only her second game back after 3 weeks away from the court, but you can tell she remembers exactly what happened last time these teams met. The way Clark walks onto the court during warm-ups tells you everything. She's not just focused, she's locked in with that cold intensity that great players get when they're about to make a statement. Her eyes find Jacy Sheldon immediately, and the stare down begins before the ball is even tipped off. This isn't just another game for Clark, this is personal. Sheldon starts guarding Clark like her life depends on it, getting way too close for comfort and using the same aggressive tactics that hurt Cunningham and Colson weeks earlier. She's bumping Clark on every screen, shadowing her on every possession, and doing all the little things that make basketball ugly to watch. The familiar pattern is starting all over again. The crowd can feel what's building. Every time Sheldon gets near Clark, the arena gets a little louder. Fans remember what happened in May, they know who caused those injuries, and they're waiting to see if the officials are going to let history repeat itself. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Clark starts hot, splashing three-pointers from way downtown and showing everyone that her time away from the court hasn't slowed her down at all. But Sheldon is right there on every possession, playing with that same reckless style that put 2 Fever players in street clothes. The officials are letting the contact go just like they did in May, and everyone in the building knows this is heading toward disaster. Coach Stephanie White is already working the referees by the first quarter, pointing out the obvious fouls that aren't getting called and trying to get someone in stripes to control the game before it gets out of hand. She knows exactly what happened last time. She knows who got hurt, and she's not going to watch it happen again without making sure the officials understand what's at stake. The third quarter is when everything explodes. Clark is bringing the ball up court when Sheldon comes over to defend. What happens next changes everything. Sheldon goes for what looks like a steal attempt, but her finger goes straight into Clark's eye. The contact is immediate, obvious, and painful. Clark's head snaps back from the impact, and she immediately grabs her face, squinting and trying to clear her vision. This wasn't a basketball play. This was the same player who hurt Clark's teammates, now coming after Clark herself with the same dirty tactics that went unpunished before. The eye poke is so blatant that even casual fans in the upper deck can see what just happened. Clark is standing there in pain, holding her eye, clearly the victim of a dangerous play that has nothing to do with basketball. Clark does what any human being would do when someone pokes them in the eye. She pushes Sheldon away from her. It's a natural reaction that anyone would have after getting jabbed in the eye socket. The push isn't violent, isn't designed to hurt anyone. It's just Clark creating space between herself and the player who just poked her in the eye. The crowd erupts because everyone saw the sequence. Eye poke first, natural reaction second. But somehow, the referees are about to make this situation infinitely worse with their response. Instead of penalizing Sheldon for the dangerous play that started everything, they hit Clark with a technical foul for pushing back after getting her eye poked. A technical foul for defending herself after someone poked her in the eye. The decision makes absolutely no sense to anyone watching. Clark just scored 32 points in her first game back from injury. She's clearly the victim of a dangerous play, and now she's getting penalized for having a natural human reaction to getting her eye poked. The technical foul sends exactly the wrong message to everyone in the arena. It tells players they can target Clark with dangerous plays, and if she reacts in any way, she'll be the one getting punished. But the eye poke was just the beginning. Marina Mabrey was watching all of this unfold, and she was about to take things to a completely different level. Right after Clark gets that bogus technical foul, Marina Mabrey decides to take matters into her own hands in the worst way possible. Clark is still dealing with her eye injury when Mabrey comes over and does something that shocked everyone in the arena. This wasn't basketball contact, this was straight-up assault. Mabrey body checks Clark like this is hockey instead of basketball, sending her tumbling backward onto the court. The hit is so obvious and so unnecessary that even people who don't watch basketball can see what just happened. Clark hits the floor hard, and you can see the shock on her face as she realizes another Connecticut Sun player just took a cheap shot at her. The body check comes completely out of nowhere. Clark isn't even engaged with Mabrey, isn't involved in any basketball play, isn't doing anything except trying to deal with her eye injury. Mabrey runs over specifically to knock Clark to the ground in retaliation for the technical foul that Clark received after getting her eye poked. The sequence is so absurd that it defies explanation. The entire Fever bench jumps up because they just watched their star player get assaulted right in front of the referees. Players are pointing at Mabrey, shouting at the officials, trying to get someone in stripes to actually do their job and protect the players who are getting targeted. The crowd is going absolutely crazy because they can't believe what they're seeing unfold on their home court. Coach Stephanie White loses her mind on the sideline, screaming at the officials who are somehow still not seeing what's happening right in front of them. She's gesturing wildly, pointing at Mabrey, trying to get the refs to understand that this has gone way beyond normal basketball contact. White knows her player just got targeted again, and the officials are about to blow another call. The referees take forever to review the play, spending what feels like 15 minutes watching the same obvious body check over and over again. When they finally make their decision, they give Mabrey just a technical foul. The same penalty they gave Clark for defending herself after getting her eye poked. Think about that for a second. Clark gets her eye poked and pushes the player away. Technical foul. Mabrey body checks Clark to the ground in retaliation. Same technical foul. The math doesn't add up, and everyone in the building knows it. The message from the officials is crystal clear. They're not going to protect Clark, no matter what happens to her on that court. Sophie Cunningham was watching all of this unfold from the bench, and she was about to make sure everyone understood that nobody messes with her teammate. The final minute of the game arrives with the Fever up big at 87-70, but Cunningham isn't thinking about the score anymore. She's thinking about May 30th when she got hurt. She's thinking about watching Clark get her eye poked with no real consequences. She's thinking about Marina Mabrey body checking her teammate to the ground. Jacy Sheldon gets the ball one more time and starts driving toward the basket for what should be a meaningless layup in garbage time. But Sophie Cunningham sees this moment differently. She sees the same player who injured her and Sydney Colson. She sees the player who just poked Clark in the eye and faced minimal consequences. She sees her opportunity for payback. Cunningham runs alongside Sheldon as she drives to the basket, and in that split second, she makes a decision that will be replayed thousands of times across social media. This isn't going to be a basketball play. This is going to be justice. Cunningham lines up Sheldon perfectly and delivers the most satisfying flagrant foul in WNBA history. She wraps Sheldon up in a bear hug and takes her to the ground, but she does it in a way that's designed to send a message without causing serious injury. This isn't a dirty play meant to hurt someone. This is calculated payback delivered by a player who remembers exactly what Sheldon did to her teammates and wanted to make sure it never happened again. The bear hug takedown is beautiful in its simplicity. Cunningham doesn't throw punches, doesn't try to hurt Sheldon, doesn't do anything that could cause lasting damage. She just wraps her arms around the player who has been terrorizing her team for months and brings her to the ground in a way that makes it clear this was intentional, calculated, and completely justified. The crowd goes absolutely crazy. Indiana Fever fans start chanting, "Sophie! Sophie!" because they just watched their player deliver the payback that everyone had been waiting for. This wasn't random violence or poor sportsmanship. This was justice finally being served after months of dirty plays that went unpunished. The flagrant foul immediately triggers a bench-clearing brawl as both teams rush onto the court. Sheldon and Cunningham are going at each other while players from both sides try to separate them or join in depending on which team they're on. The scuffle spills toward the fans section as security and officials try to restore order to what has become complete chaos. The officials assess Cunningham a flagrant 2 foul, leading to her automatic ejection. Sheldon and Lindsay Allen also get tossed for their involvement in the fight. 3 players ejected, but the damage is already done. Justice has finally been served on that court, and everyone watching knows exactly why it happened. Sophie Cunningham becomes an instant folk hero. Her jersey sales spike overnight, all-star votes pour in, and social media explodes with support for the player who finally stood up when the officials wouldn't do their job. Fans across the league praise Cunningham for protecting her teammate when the refs failed to control the game. The ejection doesn't bother Cunningham at all. She walks off that court with her head held high, knowing she just sent a message that will be remembered for years. Nobody messes with Caitlin Clark. Nobody hurts her teammates without consequences. And if the officials won't protect Fever players, then Fever players will protect each other. Coach Stephanie White goes off in her post-game press conference, calling out the officials for their failure to control the game and protect her players. She points out that this kind of thing has been happening all season long, not just in this game. When referees don't get control of physical play, competitive athletes are going to take matters into their own hands to protect their teammates. White's message is crystal clear. The officials created this situation by refusing to penalize dangerous plays, and they're responsible for what happened when players decided to handle business themselves. The Fever aren't going to be victims anymore. They're not going to watch their star player get targeted while refs stand around doing nothing. They protect their own. Clark finishes with 20 points and 6 assists, leading the Fever to an 88-71 victory that felt like so much more than just a win. Natasha Howard posts her 50th career double-double with 16 points and 12 rebounds. Kelsey Mitchell adds 17 points. This was a complete team effort, but everyone knows what really mattered. This wasn't just beating the Sun. This was the Fever proving they won't be bullied, won't be intimidated, and will protect their own when push comes to shove. The victory sends them to their first ever Commissioner's Cup final, but more importantly, it sends a message to the entire league about what happens when you target their players. The win represents everything the Fever had been building toward since that brutal May 30th loss. They got healthy, they got revenge, and they proved that targeting Caitlin Clark comes with serious consequences from her teammates. Sophie Cunningham's flagrant foul becomes the defining moment of their season, the play that showed the basketball world they're not backing down from anybody. Indiana Fever fans leave that arena knowing they just witnessed something special. Not just a blowout victory over a division rival, but a statement game that established their team's identity going forward. They protect each other, they remember who wronged them, and they deliver justice when the officials won't do their job. The chants of "Sophie, Sophie" echo through the arena long after the final buzzer. Cunningham's bear hug takedown becomes an instant classic, the kind of play that gets replayed for years whenever people talk about teammates standing up for each other. She didn't just commit a flagrant foul, she delivered justice that had been months in the making. Sophie Cunningham's revenge on Jacy Sheldon represents something bigger than just one flagrant foul in one regular season game. It represents what happens when officials fail to protect players and teammates decide to handle business themselves. It represents the difference between dirty play designed to injure and calculated justice designed to send a message. The bear hug takedown wasn't random violence or poor sportsmanship. It was the inevitable result of months of targeting that went unpunished by referees who seemed more interested in managing optics than protecting player safety. When Sheldon injured Cunningham and Coulson in May, when she poked Clark in the eye in June, when Mabrey body checked Clark to the ground, the officials consistently failed to provide appropriate consequences. Cunningham's flagrant foul filled that void. She delivered the consequences that the refs wouldn't provide, sent the message that the officials refused to send, and established the boundaries that should have been enforced months earlier. The flagrant 2 ejection was a small price to pay for making it clear that targeting Fever players comes with serious repercussions. The moment also showcased the difference between teams that are just collections of individual players and teams that function as genuine families. The Fever didn't just talk about having each other's backs, they proved it when it mattered most. Cunningham risked ejection, suspension, and fines to make sure Jacy Sheldon understood that her months of dirty play were finally going to have consequences. This is what real loyalty looks like in professional sports. Not speeches or social media posts, but actions that demonstrate genuine commitment to protecting teammates when they're being targeted. Cunningham's willingness to get ejected for delivering justice shows exactly why the Fever have become one of the most unified teams in the WNBA. The revenge game also established Caitlin Clark as more than just an individual superstar. She's the centerpiece of a team that will go to war for her when she's being targeted. The eye poke and body check she endured weren't just attacks on one player. They were attacks on the entire Fever organization, and the response made it clear that targeting Clark means dealing with all of her teammates. Sophie Cunningham's bear hug takedown of Jacy Sheldon will be remembered as one of the most justified flagrant fouls in basketball history. It wasn't a dirty play or a moment of poor judgment. It was calculated justice delivered by a player who remembered exactly what had been done to her and her teammates. The flagrant foul represents everything that makes team sports compelling. Individual talent matters, but loyalty, protection, and standing up for each other when it counts is what separates great teams from collections of talented players. Cunningham showed that the Fever aren't just trying to win games. They're building something special based on genuine care for each other. The moment also exposed the WNBA's officiating problems in the starkest possible terms. When referees consistently fail to penalize dangerous plays, when eye pokes and body checks go unpunished, when players who injure others face minimal consequences, eventually someone is going to take matters into their own hands. Cunningham's flagrant foul was the inevitable result of months of poor officiating that created the conditions for vigilante justice. Most importantly, the revenge game established the Indiana Fever as a team that won't be pushed around by anyone. They have talent, they have chemistry, and they have players willing to get ejected to protect each other. That combination makes them dangerous, not just as basketball players, but as competitors who understand that some things matter more than individual statistics or avoiding technical fouls. The Commissioner's Cup final awaits, and the entire basketball world will be watching to see what this team does next. After witnessing how they handle adversity and stand up for each other, 2025 is looking brighter than ever for Fever fans. Sophie Cunningham proved that sometimes the most satisfying moments in sports have nothing to do with scoring points or making highlight plays. Sometimes they're about delivering justice when no one else will, protecting teammates when they're being targeted, and showing the entire world that loyalty isn't just a word you put on motivational posters. That's exactly what happened when she lined up Jacy Sheldon, wrapped her arms around her, and delivered the most perfect payback in WNBA history. Justice served, message sent, revenge complete.